get a notebook, get a pen, take some notes. We're going to go over some definitions. We're going to go over growth mindset. We have to go over mindset because it's just so important. Self-soothing and self-care, what the difference is between the two really quickly. And then self-forgiveness and acceptance, that's huge. Some thinking errors and negative talk. I talk about that a lot in how to understand what your negative cognitions are. And then of course we have to have boundaries to get to self-love. And last is how to achieve self-energy, which is my favorite thing ever. So something I'm really trained in and have practiced and have and use every day in my practice as a therapist. So let's see. So what is self-love? Practicing caring for self, respecting oneself unconditionally, recognizing worth, embracing both strengths and weaknesses, uh, prioritizing. It's really about practicing. And we're going to talk about that in time, how much, this takes time, but sometimes mindfulness, it really doesn't. And being in a growth mindset doesn't take time. It's all just a daily living. Nurturing oneself emotionally, physically, balance, right? So that one's on balance, fostering a positive self-image, setting healthy boundaries. We're going to go over. So this is what self-love is. So it's really hitting everything that I wanted to talk about. Treating oneself with kindness, compassion, forgiveness. Yeah. So these are all the key uh, notes here about self-love. And then, the big thing about it is you don't want to, you have to prioritize what is the most important, right? But the thing is the way that we live in society, it's so difficult to go through and embrace your nurturing self. We just haven't been raised to do that anymore. We were just juggling way, way too much, right? So that's where it gets complicated. So let's talk about um, self-concept. So self-concept, self-love, self-worth, self-esteem. They're all very, very different, but in the same bubble, if you will. So the very, self-concept to me too is the whole thing all together. Self-concept is your belief of how people view you, which is how you view you, but from the outside, it's a collection of beliefs and ideas of how you hold those about yourself, but how you think people view you. So think about how the outside world has influenced our self-worth. We have social media, we have, you know, reviews, we have these, we're very much judged, right? So our personal traits, our abilities, our roles, and our social identity is so wrapped up in self-concept. So it shapes us though. So that's why we believe it. So it shapes the cultural influence shapes us. And then all of a sudden we go, oh, that's a belief. I actually believe that. And it's usually not true. Those are thinking errors, negative cognitions, and negative narratives. So you tell yourself things that aren't sure, not true. But it's because the experiences shape us. And then of course, as a trauma therapist and an EMDR therapist, an IFS therapist, as a trauma release, that's how it shapes our soul, shapes ourselves. Our experiences tell us from the past how we're going to believe, act, influence. Yeah, it's huge, right? So how do we get out of that and into strong perceptions of self that are positive? Hopefully you'll get some of that today and get into a better self-confidence, which is your full identity. So it's a foundation of your understandings of self, but how this influences our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors is some CBT stuff, right? So we have a thought, we have a feeling, and we have a behavior that always comes in loops hundreds of thousands of millions of times a day, honestly. That really, we have multiple thoughts and stimuli, what I call it, that comes into us every day. Think about everything you look at, everywhere you drive, everything you see, our eyes and our ears take in so much, and that influences our feelings and our behavior. So that's the whole nutshell, if you will, right? So if you have questions, go ahead and chat anything as we go. I'll be checking those. You can chat Heather. You can ask questions. So why self-love? Why in the world are we talking about this? Well, scientifically, cultivating self-love is go back to that self-concept, right? Everything you believe about self and everything that you portray as self is why we need to cultivate self-love. So caring and respecting for ourselves, of course, acknowledging worth and purpose. If you don't have that, and acknowledging is more like I'd like that to say radical acceptance of worth and purpose. So we have to get into our worth and purpose. Why do we need to deserve kindness and compassion? And back to the juggling, we've got to equip ourselves with life's challenges of just all kinds of things that get thrown at us, right? We live in a very, very stressful situation, multiple, hours of the day. We stay in a stress response scientifically quite a bit, of course, more than ever. So then we got to reduce shame and the shame culture. And if you don't know what that is, that's a whole other, I could spend a whole hour on just shame. Shame is I am bad. Guilt is I did something bad. Okay, right? Lots of Brene Brown stuff. I have other PowerPoints and lots of Brene Brown stuff in other workshops. So, and I'll send you to those other workshops as we go. As you can get more information and watch some of those if you haven't on our YouTube channel that's already set up and there. So cultivating self-love. Yeah. For your mental health, physical health, everything health. So it's all there. And this is why. Another reason why we want to cultivate self-love. So I follow I have several very, very, very favorite models that I follow, and they're all old 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, right? So Maslow's hierarchy, if most of you probably heard of this. He wrote a paper in the 50s, long story short, he came up with the theory of the human need theory. I use it every day because I see it every single day in my practice. So if you want to look at this slide a little bit, if you can't see it, which like sometimes, when we're doing these workshops, there is people that, aren't watching the slides. So I'll try to remember that. Yeah, here's the slide. Your physical needs, safety needs, belonging and love, esteem, and self-actualization, personal growth. So that's the pyramid. So think about, I use the example all the time. I was sitting at a light in Salt Lake, just right there downtown, and a homeless man walked in front of me, and I just watched him. It changed me, right? I just watched him walk across, in the crosswalk. And I constantly think about, can I get someone to feel safe if they don't have food, shelter, and water? And that is absolutely, the answer to that is no. Can I make them feel loved and belong and help them get to a state of I belong in society? No. Can I have an esteem and a status of achievement? No. Can I have personal growth? Absolutely not. It takes a lifetime sometimes to get to that top of personal growth. I feel like I have been there many, many times. Many times. I do a lot of work. So with self. So it's like I have so but if you go down to like, oh, I don't have safety in my relationship, in my workplace, I don't have safety in, a lot of different areas. When that's robbed from you, you have to go back to the physical needs. Okay, I'm staying in the physical needs. Wow, I have food, shelter, and water. Now, I always joke about this one, and he forgot something. So we live in America, right? So I always say, yeah, what's your basic needs? And I say, oh, you have a job, you have food, shelter, work. And I go through when I'm doing a history take on a new client. And I say, oh, gosh, he forgot one. It's called health insurance. Think about it. We have to have health insurance. If we didn't, we'd be in, trouble if we got, had to go to the hospital. But yeah, we need sleep and we need health insurance. Like so there's some basic needs that we've added to that, that I've added to. I always change models. I change models a little bit, add to it. And if you're got your camera on, you're going to be in the recording, just so you know. Um, and so this is how we've got to look at this. So think about it. Again, if you are not in a safe place, you are not going to get to love and belonging, and you're not going to have this worth, self-esteem ish, um, achievement, almost like confidence, you know? And then you get to personal growth, which is an amazing place to be. I'm a constant learner, teacher. And when you are in a knowledge, understanding, curiosity, meaning, and predictability, you can actually predict. I can predict, very good at that. Like you can predict what you're going to feel, what's going to happen because of past patterns, especially when I do lots of relationship stuff. So visual needs, you need gratitude and beauty and balance and flow. And I'm going to talk about all those things. So that is exactly the model that you need to understand, that this is why to get it takes quite a bit of, work to get up here. Okay. Let me check the chat and see. Yes, and we will talk about a little bit, we'll bring that up, how self concept gets messed up with trauma, right? So someone says about car accident. So yeah, where's trauma in this? What takes us back down to safety? A car accident. Yeah, we don't have security, or we don't, so then it's like, wait, I don't feel loved and belong. And you wonder why you struggle in relationships if you don't clear the trauma. So that's why we have to clear the trauma. Um, yeah. And so, yes, you feel completely out of control when a trauma takes over your basic needs. A car accident will do that too. Getting kicked out of an apartment, being, having to move is extremely traumatic. So this is another need. I just threw this in here because I love the list, because couples and families, they don't understand like really what the intimacy needs are. Okay. So this is another part where it's like Maslow, you could have added this too. So we just have to add that. But you can see how some of this is also part of it, right? So we need sexual, emotional, work, like crisis intimacy. What does that mean? Closeness in coping with problems and pain, standing together in tragedies. Holy cow. Well, let's see. Did we have crisis intimacy when we went through the last 3, 4 years? Sometimes, but not really. We were really isolated. Spiritual intimacy, the we-ness, right? Communication, conflict intimacy. Isn't that interesting? We actually need this. We need someone to help us heal through conflict and move through that. When we're stuck with a coworker or a relationship that doesn't heal conflict, then we have to like do it on our own. It's quite difficult. So back to the other slide of the beauty, music, nature, art, We need nature intimacy, right? I believe in that and creating together. So seeing a marriage as a joint venture, when you're together, most of you, 90 something percent, will be in a committed monogamous relationship, so multiple times actually sometimes. So seeing your marriage as a joint, or your relationship as your partnership as a joint venue, do we really have that? So self-talk and negative. So we have to go over this because this is where before we get started into the rest of this is where we get really hung up. So before we even get started, I'm gonna, talk about this because it's one of my favorite things. Uh, the YouTube channel, it's called Thinking Errors Part 1, Thinking Errors Part 2. Go watch that. Thousands of people have. So honestly, so it's and I've taught it hundreds of times. So it's a really good class, I guess. If you want to check thinking errors out, I have the list on here and I have the negative cognition list on here too, that you'll get in this PowerPoint, but that's just something additional to that. So the negative concept. So again, how you think people view you and how you view your whole self in your self-esteem and your self-worth and if you have a negative concept and belief system of that, is this true? How does it make me feel? What if I didn't hold this belief? And I challenge you right now to write down one belief system that you think that is holding you back, that really makes life challenging, that you have a belief system. And I promise you, your experiences shaped that, and your culture, which is your childhood, shaped that, and your attachment and your trauma. So everything shapes that. That's why when we release that, it's not true anymore. You don't have to hold it. And it's not a result of your insecurities anymore. It's not disturbing. I don't do it, but people take disturbance out of their body and heal when they go to therapy. And these negative stories are not negative anymore. They're not these. They're not the thinking errors. This is the list of the thinking errors. They're not doing the shoulds and shames, and they're not discounting the positive. That's a huge one. In America, statistically, we are horrible at these. We're horrible black and white thinkers. We discount the positive. We jump to conclusions, and we do lots of shoulds, labeling. And actually, I use the homeless man, back to that story. I actually use that as an example of labeling and mislabeling. What do you think that homeless man, what's his problem? Why can't he get to love and belonging? Relabel and mislabel. And most people are like, oh, well, it's because he's on drugs. It's usually not true. It's not all the whole story. Personalization, taking on someone's problems when you don't have control of it, and we actually soak in people's problems. That's the biggest one I see, and I teach people about how to not take on people's problems. Now, personal, it's going to be personal. That's the other problem. Oh, don't take things so personal. Don't think that, don't think, oh, that's not how this works. You do take things personal because it's geared right towards you. But personalization is taking on the other person's problems. I mean, it's personal, but I'm not going to take on people's problems. So that one's a huge one. What if he isn't even homeless? Yeah, right? You're right. He looked pretty homeless. He had a lot of stuff with him. He was walking across the street. So yes, I have to jump to conclusions and be like, yeah, this guy's homeless. No, he just has a lot of stuff with him and he's pushing it across the road, right? Absolutely right. So this is the negative cognition to the positive cognitions. So this is what we reprocess, right? In order to get into self-love and get rid of your belief systems is the whole point. We have to look at these and go, okay, wait, I can't protect myself. Oh, I can learn to protect myself. I'm never safe. Oh, I can be safe when I do this, and I can feel safe in my body. So I have no control over what other people do. So it's really when you get into power, control, and safety, the responsibility ones are really tough. That's the personalization. It's my problem that you have a problem. Sounds fun. I don't belong. I'm difficult. I'm okay as I am, right? Okay is my favorite word. I'm okay, you're okay. I don't have that book referenced, but that's a 1970s model too that I follow a lot. Okay, let's okay, check the chat. Okay, growth mindset, fixed mindset. So we're just teaching you a few things here. So real quick, this is just Carol Dweck mindset. It's perfect little book of 40 years of her work. Very, very important because this goes into, again, your thinking errors, the way that you deal with things, the way that you won't do self love or get into self concept or self esteem or self at all, which I will teach you what self really is at the end. So, ego, right? Fixed. All right, challenges or opportunities, development, experience, applicate, thrive in challenges, high standards, growth message, which is a lot of this. This is one of my favorite little books. It's not for everyone, but I'm going to share it. It's not for everyone. It's a book the way that I tell people how to do books is pick one and work on it for a year. That's your New Year's resolution. I don't even do January, I do your birthday month. Your birthday month, you pick a new book. I did this one for a year, several years back. It's like tiny, right? And it's worn out because see the pages are falling out. So I pick a book. This is Chris Prentice, one of my favorite authors. He's got several books that I have read. And so, you go through this little book and you just take a chapter. You just take one chapter. If you're not a teacher, don't go through the teacher part of this, right? But parenting, business, school, relationships. If you're a parent, go pick the parent part of how to be a growth mindset parent. I have a whole workshop on that, by the way. It's called Growth Mindset Parenting. So just pick something. And Chris Prentice also has Be Who You Want, Have What You Want. Yeah, I've got about 6 of his books. So change your thinking, change your life. So he talks about addiction. He has an addiction book, actually. That's his main thing. But here's a fixed mindset person, right? Yeah, everything's against me. The Zen art of happiness is all about everything happens just as it happens. And believe you me, with trauma and my own trauma, that's really hard concept. So it's not easy. You don't just jump into that and go, oh yeah, yeah. So that's why that book is not for everyone, but take it or leave it and use part of it because failures are only temporary. And that's the same thing. And while I'm on this subject, man's search for meaning, right? I mean, who could not just just absolutely love his mindset before he even knew what this was, right? And that's man's search for meaning. If you don't know it, uh, Frankl was in a concentration camp, and how he had a how he survived with a growth mindset was amazing. Okay, so what's self-soothing? How are we going to get into self-love? Again, this is the purpose. How do we get into and understand what self-love is? And it's not ego and it's not narcissistic. That's the problem. We think that self-soothing and self-love and is selfish. Self-soothing is not selfish. We have to self-soothe. If we're not, we're walking around like a zombie ready to explode or unload on everyone and society. And you know why road rage is up 300%? Because of this. Like all kinds of things, right? We're just a ticking time bomb because we're not going through self-love, self-soothing, self-care. So self-soothing is very different from self-care. Write down how you self-soothed yourself as a child. Think about it. Was it healthy or dysfunctional? I'm sure there was some healthy stuff. Did you eat? Did you pull your hair? Did you hit people? Did you hate yourself? Did you self-harm? So there's a helpful self-soothing and there's a harmful self-soothing. It's a repetitive action of regulating your emotions by yourself, literally by yourself. Now, some people can self-soothe, right? Caregiver when you're a child, but you have to learn to self-soothe. You develop those in your early years of how to deal with life. Guess what? Those follow you. And those are the self-harming ones that you're like, so if I have a bubble bath, that's a self-soothing. If I drink tea, which I make every single day, that's my self-soothing. And I have self-soothing time, you know? And so, but did I make tea as a kid? No, you know? So I've had to replace some things, right? You have to replace some some calming with self-harm that is hurtful in your self-soothing. But guess what? The key with self-soothing is it does the same thing on the brain if it's this way or this way. So that's why we do the harmful stuff. That's why we eat or stare, gaming or something that is a self-soothing because we're cutting out the negative emotions that we don't want to have. And we're bringing in oh, wait, I can't face that. So I'm just going to ignore it. And then it actually brings dopamine both the same way if it's harmful or hurtful. So we have to get rid of the self-injury. So let me look at the chat and see. Yes, music is huge. And here's the list, right? Blankets and snuggies and baths and as adults, what are we doing? Because that is now we're going to talk about time in a minute. It's like, no, I don't have time. I don't have time to do self-soothing, which is daily. Self-care, that's when you're going to the gym. That's when you're, doing some other self-care. You're going to the doctor. You're doing physical balance. Yeah, good self-soothings. So playing with a pet, going for a walk, getting a punching bag when you're not angry, by the way. So we don't want to encourage we used to say, oh, you can go punch your pillow when you're mad. That is actually false now. We don't want to encourage more of the neural pathway that says, yeah, when you're angry, be angrier. So punching a bag and other stuff on the outside when you're not in those emotions is what we want. So we want to do self-soothing when we're okay. And self-soothe when you're not, but in a healthy way, you have to do these. If you're not feeling okay, then use essential oils, use some five senses. This is all about your five senses. Just bring out those whichever way you can in all five ways. It's very, very important to get you present, which is mindfulness, and getting into self because that's your frontal lobes. You can make better decisions and everything else. So calm place imagery. I put this a little YouTube. I was trying to find just like a short link, but really I want you to go to Insight Timer to do calm place, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute. But that's a YouTube link to actually practicing calm place imagery and always doing bilateral stimulation with it, which is tapping back and forth this way in a butterfly hug or on your knees. It's not the tapping you think, it's just back and forth. So we want to install the calm place. That's how you do that. I know that was a lot. So if you want to watch Tapping in Joy on the YouTube channel, that's what that's about, our Blomquist Tale. Tapping in explains that. You can tap in calm place, you can tap in anything you want, actually. So why do we need this balance? Because right here, sleep, exercise, diet is extremely important. But here's your balance, right? So in order to be balanced in self-love, you have to have all these going on. And most people aren't balanced. They really aren't. And there is some, you have to work at it, right? The ones that are, and the ones that are really grounded, connected, you're doing the daily stuff of emotional and spiritual work in order to stay balanced. And so how do we take time? How are you going to take time today? Well, number one, you're here. That's self-care. You're spending an hour listening to this workshop. Super, super noble. That's taking care. You've scheduled your reward time. I talk about this all the time. I joke about myself, right? So I got to make fun of myself. I schedule my, I love washing my car. It's my reward. It's like, oh, it's like here, here, here. It's like, oh, I like my clean car. So I'm gonna schedule, I have time, energy, and money is going towards something that is a reward system. That also gives you dopamine for you to do it again, which is motivation, and then you're going to do it again. So make sure that you actually schedule it. You have to write it down, you have to schedule it. Now, writing, there's lots of different ways to write. I'm a fan of mind dumping, which is writing and then getting rid of it. If you're going to journal, like when I take notes, when last night I watched a document, I have like a whole page of like, notes. And I was like, yeah, how do you, choose how to trust? Okay, well, let's see. How do I trust? If you're going to be in self, you have to be in gratitude and self forgiveness and trust, which is self forgiveness. So that's a huge one. How do we trust anything or anyone? So you just have to focus on your mission, your gratitude. So writing that is extremely important. And I'm a big fan of my, elephant journal that has everything in it and all set up for me to write, write your focus on your mission for the year, for the week, for the month. And so it sends you into a very purposeful self. So if you're not writing things down, which is about 2%, 2% actually write it down and follow through of society, like 2% of us. It's very, very terrible, right? It's really because it's like, wait, well, I don't have time. Okay, it's fair. We struggle with time. And then check out how much time you really actually spend. And I do a whole time. You can find this workshop on managing time, like a time management workshop. I have that. And then you go, and I go through a protocol of like, we have 168 hours in a week. What are you really doing with your time? Right? But you got to schedule it. You also have to schedule downtime and self-soothing time and self-care time and dissociation time where you're just watching a movie. Dissociate for 2 hours. You have to make it. So there's your balance real fast. You can just look at this slide later. Physical care, emotional care, mental, social, and spiritual. Okay. So this is just like a whole bunch of information. If you like, hey, where am I out of balance? And you actually do your 168-hour little, protocol of like, where did your time go for this week? You'll see really quick where you're out of balance. Really quick. Because I can see it in people very quickly, right? And I'm like, oh, you don't have connection with social life. You don't have a tribe. You don't have you're lacking in friends, family, support groups. Yeah. So then we have to work on your self-care in social balance. Boundaries. So why do we not do this? It's because of boundaries. Someone just asked, like, do you have a journal that you prefer? Yes. It's called an elephant. And I buy these from my clients. I get them when they go on sale. I buy like three. So I'm switching over. I switch over at the end of April every year. I'm on my 6th year of it. So my focus is in the front. My mind, like my mind map, my vision board, like you can see how full it is. And then it goes through the month, and then it's open for the each week. And then of course every single, and I show it this to clients all the time. Every single class that I take or training or anything I'm studying for, I'm doing one of these. Every book that I listen to, which I think I did about 6 hours in the last 2 days of a book. I mean, easy. I did 2 hours of a book this morning. It's just what I do. And so, but then so then you have this whole space, this whole big, the end of the elephant journal to write. And those are things you want to keep, right? So we only write things that we want to keep. Journaling your crap and your high emotion and your negative narratives is to get rid of. So you can dump it and mind dump it and on a whiteboard, on a piece of paper, on something, but you got to get rid of it. It's not to read again. That's the whole point of getting it out of you. That's my favorite thing to do with most clients is number one, mind dump it and then get rid of it. So this is like something I need to remember. This is a spiritual thought. This is something that you know, journaling, that's to keep, right? But that's very few and in between. Everything else we get rid of. That's the whole point. So here's some boundaries. Why are we not setting boundaries around our self-care, our self-love? Why do we not do that, right? Well, number one, we're scared. We're in fear brain. And if we're in fear brain, we're not going to be in self-love. It's the opposite of love. So there's either fear or love. And so when we're in love for self or others, and that's an ego state, honestly, then we will get to these and we can actually start holding some boundaries. Not easy, but that's a whole other PowerPoint, right? And I have one on boundaries too. And actually, Boundaries with Toxic People is the most favorite workshop so far, besides Thinking Errors that's on the YouTube channel. Okay, so burnout, just check out to see how burned out you are. I'm not going to go over it. It's just here though, for your knowledge of like, am I burned out? Because can you have boundaries, self-love, self-soothing in a healthy way if you're burned out? Absolutely not. And we are stressed, burned out, onset of stress, chronic stress. Most of Americans live in burnout. Habitual is over 2 years. You're in a state of complete habitual burnout. Not healthy. And these are the symptoms and the reactions that you need to look for. And in most people that come in, you know, clients or just in general, statistically, America, we have a lot of this problem. Number one, we're rigid thinkers and we have a real high problem with concentration. Okay. So 56 seconds. 56 seconds we hold our concentration up at college age students. It used to be 3 minutes. And you think why our kids aren't focused, why we can't stay focused. And I'm like, that's pretty normal. But the fact that you can flip back and go, oh, wait, I got to focus, I got to be mindful and go back to right now, then that's the point. We just have to recognize it and come back to focus. Okay. There's mindfulness. I always jump ahead my slides. I don't realize it, but I do all the time. So here's your mindfulness slide, right? Self-love, self-soothing, if we're not present, is not going to happen. So we've got to be present, and you can just try to get into mindfulness stuff. Now, here's your Insight Timer app on the bottom here. Insight Timer, free, severely helpful. It's been one of my favorite things ever. There's just gobs, thousands actually, of anything that you would like to do on there for free with mindfulness, yoga, IFS, EMDR, music, sleep. I've used the sleep one a ton myself. Like it's when you're having trauma and grief, that's all I've been in for months. And it's like I just have played it every day sometimes. So you just go into that, right? Finding your resources, but you have to say, okay, I need to self-soothe right now. This is worth this. I need to stay in the present. How can I have something help me? Which we do need that now. We really do need that help. So we just keep finding things to help us keep the five senses going, and listening to something really helps. 4 square breathing, 4 up, hold for 4, 4 down, let it out. Wait for 4. These are 4 counts, 4 seconds. And then do it 4 times. Tracing and coloring, just do it. Color, trace, dump it. Focus point is something that's very easy to bring back focus and mindful. If you just get off track, you just need to, it's very easy. These are things that you could do anywhere, any place, anytime. And you just put a pen or your finger right out in front of you, and then you gaze at it, and then you put your gaze at the wall, and then you come back to it, gaze at the wall, come back to it. Do it 30 times, and you will bring your brain back to the frontal lobes where you can actually self-talk. Sorry. The name of the journal is called Elephant Journal. It has a little elephant on it. So that's all I know. It's called an Elephant Journal. And if it's like on Amazon, the Simple Elephant Journal. Yeah. Shows a little. So maybe someone can find the link and put in there. But yeah, it's any kind of journal works, but digital, as long as you can write. Okay. So let's talk about this. Let's practice this. So how do you get into self? So far, we tell you, okay, mindfulness and boundaries and self-care, taking time. But it's not that easy, because I want you to learn about exiles, managers, and firefighters a little bit. And don't worry about it. It's very deep. It's okay. But these protector, younger selves of us hijack us. They really hijack our calm, our connectiveness, our creativity, our courageous, our clear, like our self, which is yourself. What does self look like for you? Write it down. What does self look like? What part of this is not, you might not be confident. So it's like, who's stopping you from being confident? Well, it's a younger self. It's a learned behavior. It's a cultural shame. It's trauma. It's scared. So you're always in fear. Okay. So you are in a protector field. Then you're not going to get to compassion, which is gratitude, which is forgiveness, which last night, that's what I took notes on. Talking about forgiveness, and I was listening to another book, but then I remembered this morning, and I added this one into the resources, into this PowerPoint, just half hour ago, the book of forgiveness. So really, how do we forgive self if we're in a fear-based brain, or fear, fight, flight, or freeze, or we're in our protectors? You're not. So we don't have compassion for self, and we're not very confident, and we're definitely not creative. So when we're in our creative brain, our depressive brain does not light up. You know that it does not light up. So we can really imagine ourselves being creative without being creative, or courageous, or compassion, or really confident. So we have to like do some imagery work to say, wait, why am I getting hijacked by the protectors that says you're not confident? You can't be in self. You don't have time to take care of yourself. That's compassion. Do you see all the self-talk that goes on? That's a part that tells you you're not worth it, right? So you get into that reactive part, and then you're just, firefighters are really mad. If you're in a firefighter part, you're just mad. And then you need some pain management, some anger management. You need, because it's like, if you're in a pain situation where you have chronic pain, then that's what happens. And you just get mad, or you shut down, but that numbs, and, you self-soothe in a horrible way, honestly, by eating or self-sabotaging, or all the addictions that we have. Right. So when we're in severe shame and self-loathing, like self-loathing and worthlessness, we're in an exile. We're in a very younger part of us that carries pain. So just notice that this is not easy if we are in our protectors. So then you do a little bit of IFS stuff, which is internal family systems, and you learn about those parts that are telling you these lies, right? But then at the same time, they're protecting us because of the trauma, the pain in the past. So then we get, through getting past your past. That's Shapiro. That's how we get into trauma and do EMDR. I know that's loaded. I know it. It's really loaded. But who's your leader? Who wants to, yeah. So fawning fits in with the protectors. It would probably be in an exile, like managers are not managers. I'm a really good manager. I'm a manager all the time. Manager says, here's the time, here's me getting to work. It keeps you safe because you have to perform, produce. You're actually a perfectionist if you're in a strong manager part. So if you're fawning, then you're in an exile. You're just like a a, a, a pleaser. You're a people pleaser. You're passive, and you're also um, in the passive. You're just passive, not assertive. So you're in the freeze. So freeze, that's all the same thing. So if you're in fight or freeze, so firefighters, freeze is an exile. So if you're in that part of the brain all the time, like just freezing, and you don't have a voice and you don't have assertive boundaries, you're in an exile part. Managers are like, yeah, I'm just going to get things done and overdo and perfectionism. And you won't go to sleep if you're in manager. You have to put managers to sleep to get into calm part. To get into creative part, you can't be a manager. If I'm doing something creative, which I do all the time, I oh, I got to get something else done. I can't be just sitting here doing your craft or writing or showing something. Yes, you can. You have to be out of manager. So you see the different things that you have to shift to be able to get into a calm state of self. And self is self energy, what IFS calls self energy. And we teach clients, I do, how to be in self energy more, but we have to calm the other protectors. So do you see how we get hijacked by self love and self energy? So you can go to Insight Timer, search IFS, and you're going to see dozens and dozens and dozens of guided meditations, imageries that you can practice this, by the way. It's my favorite thing ever on that app. It's just a fantastic information. Dick Swartz himself is on there. He has several he's Richard Swartz. He goes by Dick Swartz. So he's on there and he has several guided imageries and meditations that you could do with IFS and learn your parts and get into self is the whole point. The whole point of this is how to get into self-love and to get into this soul, which is self. Fear is ego. So getting into the value and the heart and the purpose. So this is a little slide about, imagery, meaning, prayer, relaxation. One thing in the moment, that's your presence, that's your mindfulness. And taking, V is for vacation. Take a break from stress. You have to vacation that every single day. And then have some encouragement and questions and answers. I'm going to pull up the slide of these books. If anyone has questions on those, but I think I've shown you most of them. These are my other two. So Care of the Soul is on there by Moore. And then this is one of my favorites, Chemistry of Calm. So this one's a little homeopathic, everything that I do with my integrated medicine for mental health, settle your mind, stop worrying, start living fully. It's settle your mind, overcome drug-free plan to quiet your fears and overcome your anxiety. Chemistry of Calm. So here's the references here. So let's take a couple minutes and answer some questions or see. Yeah, so Insight Timer is free. It's all free, by the way. So don't pay for it. There's like some advanced classes you can take. But no, the whole thing. There's all the stuff that I have people do on the IFS section or the EMDR or the sleep or the calm. It's all free. So don't pay for it.